Welcome back to 15 with Fosca, the podcast. My guest today is illustrator Sheean Hanlan. Welcome, Sheean.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here with you.
I'm so happy to have you here too. And we were just talking off mic about when we first met and how we met. And I always love to start my podcast telling people a little bit about how we first did come into contact with each other. And it was thanks to, well, we have a lot of friends in common.
We have a lot of friends in common.
Right? Yeah. So we have a lot of friends in common. And then at a certain point, Andrew, who's, the producer of this podcast, was like, you and Sheean should really meet. And she would be a great guest for your podcast. And then we had a really lovely lunch together.
Yeah.
And we've kept in contact. And finally, the stars aligned. And here we are. Recording the podcast. I'm delighted to have you today.
Thanks again. I'm so excited, even though I'm a little nervous, but I think it's going to be fun.
It is going to be fun. So the first question I want to ask you is about your first encounter with Florence.
Oh my gosh. It feels like it was yesterday, but that was actually such a long time ago. So I actually studied abroad in Florence. I want to say that was 10 years ago now. Oh my gosh.
Really?
Yeah, 10 years
Wow.
ago. I was a student at Pepperdine, and it was my sophomore year. You know, I'm originally from the Bahamas, but I went to university in Malibu, and I had chosen Pepperdine because they're known for their study abroad programs, and I really wanted to see the world, and it would have been my first time in Europe and in Italy. And so, I decided to study abroad in Florence for the year, not really knowing what to expect, but I just knew I felt something was going to change, like something was going to be an instrumental journey for me as a human being. And it turned out to be true. I basically went for a year, and at the time I was a pre-med student. But when I came to Florence, I just fell in love with the art and the culture and the history, and something in me clicked, and I felt like, I definitely want to live here at some point. I didn't know how or when it would happen. But I just knew, like, when I graduate, I want to find a way to return to this city and maybe even pursue that childhood dream I had of being an artist that I kind of like tucked away in a box. I was like, that's unrealistic. But no, I was really blown away by my study abroad experience here. And I ended up having like an adoptive Italian family, and they were flag throwers. So they would take me to their practices, and then we'd have like, traditional Tuscan meals in their home. And I don't know, Florence felt like coming home for me. And I hadn't felt that even in my own country or in LA. So I knew it was a place I needed to return to.
Wow, I just got chills because our stories are very similar. I also fell in love with Florence when I did study abroad here. Yeah.
With Brown.
I did it actually as an undergraduate. So I was at Bryn Mawr, but I did the Syracuse program because that was the only program I could do. And I did it for a year. And I also had the same like aha moment and said, I have to find a way back. And then eventually I did as well, because I had that feeling, that same feeling you describe of, wait, there's something pulling me here. I need to be here. So how did you, it's not easy.
No.
And so I would love for you to share with our listeners, how you did make it back, because that's not an easy thing to do.
Right. Okay. So I finished my year abroad in 2017, and then something happened where I actually had to wait a bit before going back to Pepperdine. I had to sit out a semester. Then I went back, and I was like, why don't I just do this next semester in Florence? So I went back for a summer, and I did an internship. I switched from pre-med to just doing English, literature and rhetoric, and then I somehow came back again in the winter of 2018 for a Christmas course. I was always trying to come back during my breaks. It was an art course, and I just came and I spent Christmas alone in Florence. That's just how much I loved being here. Like,
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And then after I graduated, so this is really interesting. I recently shared this story at a talk I gave at the Social Hub called Fuck Up Nights, where you talk about your failures.
Yes.
But basically, yeah, I I'd graduated from Pepperdine and I was working at a magazine in Los Angeles. And the plan was to, climb the corporate ladder there in Los Angeles as a journal. No, well, I was working at a magazine, so in publishing, in that whole world of publishing, communications, public relations. And I mean, it was a good first job out of college. Like the pay wasn't great, but I was learning a lot of transferable skills, and I enjoy writing. However, it just so happened that I did not get picked for an H-1B visa to stay in America. So I had a tough decision to make. I had to figure out like what I was going to do with my life because I hadn't even thought of that as a possibility. I thought, you graduate from an American university, you can stay, you can work, but it's really, really hard to get a work visa.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's even harder now.
Yeah. So anyway, it ended up working out that I just decided, why don't I just go to Italy for 3 months while I figure that out? Because my boss had promised, he was like, Sheean, we're going to find a way to get you back. We'll work with a lawyer. We'll get you another type of visa and you'll be able to come back. So I was like, you know what? This will be my eat, pray, love moment. I'll go to Italy like I wanted to, and I'll do a 3-month art course and at least try it out and just see if this is something I really want to pursue. At least I would never have that regret of not following that art dream that I had. And so I did that in the summer of 2020. I left Los Angeles, left my boyfriend, fully planning to go back to Los Angeles. And that was actually during COVID. So I didn't even realize at the time they weren't letting people in the border. Like you had to have had a work visa or a student visa to enter Italy. So even just the process of getting here was crazy. In fact, when I came to the airport in Florence, they were like, where's your visa? We're sending you back.
No.
And I just started freaking out. I started praying, and they looked at my passport like, we've never seen a Bahamian passport before. You can go through. And that's basically how I got it.
No.
Yeah.
I can't even believe that.
That's the story. And so I found a studio eventually where I was studying like classical art techniques. Like I really wanted to learn how the old masters drew and painted.
Yeah.
And, Florence is full of these ateliers that teach these techniques. And so they're a little bit different from your typical art school that's focused on creativity and abstraction. It's more focused on learning real observational drawing and painting skills, drawing from a live model, drawing still life, cast studies, and all of that. And so I did that. And I think around that time, my boss, his business had, during COVID, like a lot of magazines were folding because it was also like built on events. Like we hosted a lot of events as one of our main sources of income, and the event industry completely collapsed. So I had to figure out what I was going to do now that LA and America was officially not going to be in the picture anymore.
Yeah.
And so I just stayed.
That's great.
I just stayed. And I was like, I enrolled in in a language school, started studying Italian, and I stayed in art school for the next almost 3 years. And so that's how I was able to like stay in Italy while learning this new skill. And I was also doing lots of odd jobs, doing writing jobs while doing art school, Italian school, and also just starting to like post and share my life on TikTok and Instagram. And I still wasn't really sure where everything would lead to because, like I said, I didn't come here with a full plan of like, I'm going to study this art thing, going to get in some galleries, I'm going to I didn't have anything figured out. It was all just unfolding sort of naturally and it wasn't very pretty,
No,
and there was
sounds like
a
it was
lot.
hard.
Yeah.
But fast forward
Yeah.
to right now, where you're finally seeing all of the fruits of your labor. You worked so hard. I mean, Italy, I think, if anything, makes you like very scrappy, you have to be very flexible. You have to be creative. You have to be innovative. I think for people who don't live here and really live here, it's hard to understand like just how difficult the job market is, just how hard being an artist here is,
Yeah.
right? So fast forward to now.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you have, first of all, I did not know that you were pre-med, or maybe you had mentioned it the first time we met, but I had not recalled that. I just think it's incredible that I was getting chills while you said, like, you finally listened to your, you heeded that voice, your childhood dream to become an artist.
Right.
And you have done that. And so tell our audience about what you do now and how all of this hard work, I mean, you really invested in this, Sheean. I mean,
my gosh, thank
going
you.
to art school and really learning your craft. So let's talk about how that plays out today.
Yeah. So, first of all, thank you. Essentially, my parents, they made a great sacrifice to help me with going to university in Los Angeles. So I really wanted to figure this part of my journey out on my own. So I really had to work hard and show them that all of the time and money they invested in my education, didn't go to waste. But when I was in art school studying these classical techniques, I really enjoyed learning the techniques. I learned so much about chiaroscuro, which is, light and dark. I learned about how the old masters painted subjects from life. I learned proportion, anatomy, perspective, all of the principles of art that I had admired in these pieces I'd seen in the Uffizi and Palazzo Pitti, and that had first awakened in me this desire to be an artist. But then I'm not really sure. I just realized that particular style of art, while I appreciated learning the fundamentals of art, it was not for me. I noticed the other students, they would show up on the weekends and just be drawing, the master copies and the figure drawings and stuff like that. And my teacher, he's Ukrainian, and they're very, very intense and serious and focused. And so the approach is very serious. And I take myself and I take my work seriously, but I believe that art should be something that is more expressive and joyful. I don't believe it has to be something where you're slaving away in a dark studio and this very austere vibe, and your subjects have to be so deep and melancholy to be considered real art. And I don't know, I was wrestling with all of this. I was I don't really know where doing all of these still lifes and landscapes and figure drawings are going to take me career-wise. I was learning a lot as an artist, but then turning that into a career, there was a gap. I felt the schools, I feel a lot of the ateliers and art schools here, they don't really teach you how to bridge the gap between learning the skills you need to be an artist, but actually becoming an entrepreneur and a business owner, because when you're an artist, that's essentially what you are.
Yeah.
And no one really prepares you for that or teaches you that. And so I sort of was like a stray dog let out in the wild after art school.
Now
I had to figure it out.
Yeah.
And fast forward to 2 years after art school, and I'm now a full-time artist. I've worked with the National Gallery of London on projects. I've recently been featured in Vogue, British Vogue, for a wedding at Villa Miani in Rome. And I've done all sorts of collaborations that I would have never expected. And it all came truly from just deciding I'm just going to do what feels natural to me and not what is someone else's dream or idea of what being an artist looks like. And that probably was, out of all the risks I've taken in life, that was the biggest and most difficult and hardest decision to do, to decide to just be myself and see where being myself and being true to the type of art that comes naturally to me would lead. And so I think the first time I started doing this was last year when a friend reached out and saw that I had been painting. I'd painted on an art show, or I'd painted on an Italian TV show that's on Rai Rye Quattro
I saw that.
with Patrizio Roversi. I don't
saw
know
that.
how they found me. They found me on TikTok or Instagram,
Yeah.
and they were like, "We would love if you can go on a tour of Veneto with Patrizio and just like paint the scenes." And I, at the time, was so scared. I was like, you know what? I don't think I can do this. It was all in Italian, and I had just started, like finding my style and like figuring out like the mediums I like. I had just started playing around with watercolor, so I was like, I don't know if I can do this. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it and I'll learn along the way. And it ended up being amazing. I love the immediacy of sketching like right at the scene and like
Yeah.
seeing, how happy it makes people, like seeing art come to life, seeing the process. And I was like, this is something I want to do like as a career. I didn't really even know that existed as a career, like live illustration, which is what I do now.
Yeah.
And then a friend reached out and asked if I would be willing to paint the guests at her client's wedding. And so that happened last May. And then since then, I just post and a lot of other requests came. And then now here we are.
And I love it. And, I see your work and I see how much joy it brings to people and how much joy it brings to you. When you were speaking about, I recognize how important it is to have that kind of rigorous training in your craft, right? Yeah. But at a certain point, very much the same way you decided to come back to Florence and follow your heart, something was telling you, okay, this is what I need to do. I need to be doing my thing, the thing that brings me joy. And I love it when I look at your social media and I see all these lovely portraits, and I always think like, I can't wait to have an event where I can have Sheean come and do these incredibly beautiful drawings. What a wonderful memory you give people and a moment, that's something so special, and I think you've fallen into like, I don't know. I think a lot of it is intentional. You really went out and pursued what you really wanted to do, but I think there was obviously a need for it as well, right?
Right. Yeah. So I think something else that really led me to feel like this was the right path was seeing the rise of AI. And a lot of artists were threatened by AI and thinking, oh, we're going to, like, no one's going to need real artists anymore. But I felt like, what, this is actually a good thing. And I think in when we were talking earlier, like you talked about how my style is, both real and like a bit abstract. So a part of it is me wanting to show the human hand in my work. I don't feel the need to draw everything completely realistic. Like if someone wanted that, they can just, put their photo through AI and have ChatGPT prepare like a rendered image or something. I want to show the beauty of wabi-sabi, I think is what the Japanese call it, the beauty of imperfection, or just like something made by human hands. And I think that with AI, people want to be involved in the process of making a work of art. And so when I started painting at events and weddings, I noticed people get a real like thrill from seeing an artist at work.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about the result, it's also about involving people in like the experience of bringing a portrait or a piece of work to life. And so that's sort of one of the main like advantages of painting at events. People get to be involved in the experience. It's not just going to a gallery and just seeing the final piece, And I do try to work from intuition, but I like to think of it as like a trained intuition in the sense that when you fill yourself with beautiful works of art and literature and music, and also just being surrounded by like artisans and the beauty of the Italian countryside, how can good things not come out of that? Like from you filling your cup with those things, like it's inevitable, like what you create, and you just trust your mind to naturally and your hand to like naturally produce those things. So I try to constantly go and to the museums and exhibitions and like really listen to what inspires me. And then I know that inevitably that will come out in my work naturally. And so I view it as a way of trusting your instinct, but also like training your instinct at the same time. Does that make sense?
Totally. You've said so many amazing things. I don't really know where to start, but I will start with what you said about, for example, AI, and I think people's deep desire to experience humanity. And I love the fact that you talk about something like imperfection, because obviously, you're illustrating at a wedding. It's a live event. There is this spontaneity in it. And I love what you say about filling yourself, surrounding yourself with all of this beauty, and then it comes out in everything you do. And I think what I would ask as sort of a follow-up question to that is, Florence is not always billed as an easy city to live in as an artist, because sometimes you feel the weight of the greats, and you're surrounded by so much incredible art and so much incredible beauty. How do you reconcile that with your own work?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. I want to think about that, actually. I have so many thoughts about that. Okay.
Yeah, no, go on.
So one of my favorite writers is Henry James. And when I was a student at Pepperdine, we read this story called The Madonna of the Future. And it talked about this American artist who moved to Florence, and he was so inspired by the old masters. And he would go to these dinner parties, and he'd be able to tell you the history of every piece of work in the Uffizi by Raffaello, Michelangelo, Leonardo. He was such a personality, and people saw that he was also an artist. So it was like great, and everyone was excited to see his works of art. So he was working on this piece that he called The Madonna of the Future, and his idea was to take the qualities that he liked from Raphael's paintings, some of the anatomy from Michelangelo's paintings of Madonnas, and all of these great masters, and combine them into one Madonna. He already had a model and everything, and everyone was so excited. And one guy was particularly so inspired by him and so ready to see this great piece. And then this other woman comes along. He's been working on this painting for 10 years now. And in fact, when this visitor to Florence went to this artist's studio, he saw that the canvas was actually empty, and the model, who was supposed to be this young, beautiful Madonna, was in old age. And then the artist basically ended up dying after the revelation of not having done anything. And he was like, I have the mind of Michelangelo, but I don't have the hands of Michelangelo. And I think sometimes I think we can be inspired by the greats, but we have to carve our own path and form our own voice. What they've already done their work, and now it's time for us to do our work. And that doesn't mean that you can't learn from them and build upon them. But when you try to, I don't know, I feel like we each have a purpose as a creative person, and we were each put here to do something that no one else can do. And so in the beginning, I did have this dream of emulating the old masters, but no, we're living in 2026. It's a different reality. People experience art differently. They've created their beautiful works of art. It's now time for me to do something that no one else can do.
Yeah.
That's how I view it.
I love that. No, I love that. And you're doing it really well. I wanted to talk a little bit more about your background, because you have lived between the U.S., the Bahamas, and now Florence. And how did these places shape the emotional temperature of your work?
So the Bahamas is... it has a really thriving art scene. A lot of artists, they do more modern and contemporary styles of art. But one thing that a lot of Bahamian artists have in common is using lots of color, because the Bahamas is such a colorful place. Even our architecture, the homes, all of the buildings, they're pinks and yellows and greens and blues, and the ocean is the bluest in the world.
Right.
And so I've always just naturally been drawn to color, I think, since growing up there. I was born and raised, I lived there for the first 18 years of my life. And so there's always that island sensibility in how I approach color. And then in Malibu is when I first started studying Renaissance art history and art history of the world and Europe and things like that. And then I went to university. I did our program in Florence, and I got to see the works of Michelangelo and Leonardo up close. Our professor would take us on these field trips to all of the different museums.
Yeah.
And I think from that, I just learned the beauty of movement in works of art, especially contrapposto. So even when you're doing a standing pose, I just try to show more of the gesture or the feeling I want to convey. I try to convey the essence of a person in their body language and certain microexpressions, if that makes sense. And I think I learned that from just looking at frescoes in all of the different villas and palaces around Florence. And then I'm also really inspired by like Art Nouveau paintings. Like there's a
Yeah, there's a
Toulouse-Lautrec.
great exhibit on right now. Yeah.
He's one of my favorite artists. I still haven't been to the exhibition,
I
but
haven't been either.
we should go.
We should go. I don't know when it's going on until, but we should go. Let's look it up and we'll go together.
Yeah, no, I'd love that.
I really want to go. I love the Toulouse-Lautrec, and I'm really embarrassed that I haven't been yet.
It's okay. It's fine because it's
Okay.
going to be there until like February.
Okay,
but-
good. Perfect. Okay. We'll go in the new year.
Yeah, so like I love his story. I love that he just depicted these characters from the Moulin Rouge and like all of these like performers and dancers. I just love how each person is just larger than life, and his style is just so iconic and graphic. And that was what I was pushing my style towards, because you would think like when you study like realism and observational drawing, it would be easy to just draw in a less realistic style, but nothing could be further from the truth. Drawing in a simplified style is harder than just copying reality.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot from just going to these museums here in Italy and also around Europe, like in London and France, and seeing how artists who had a similar background as me, they were trained in classical techniques, but then they took their own path afterwards. So even Toulouse-Lautrec, I think I read that it took him 8 years to find his style, because he also studied at like a traditional art school, did the cast studies, figure drawings and the realism, but he wanted something more than that. And Van Gogh as well, like if you search, you can see a lot of master copies Van Gogh did before he ended up like finding his own style. And people think it's something that artists naturally have, but no, it's something you develop just from looking at what you're naturally drawn to, and then taking all of your inspirations and combining them into your own voice. And it's something that happens gradually. I don't think it's something you can rush. And as you really like focus on what it is you like and don't like, you'll get closer and closer to who you're supposed to be as an artist. And I think the journey is always evolving. Like it's not something you finally arrive to, if that makes sense.
Totally. Is there something that you find yourself drawn to in this moment, that you maybe a material or a style that you haven't worked in and that you find yourself sort of dabbling in or curious about?
So I would say lately I would like to do more narrative paintings, if that makes sense, more illustrations of characters that I make up, like in this scene of Italy. Like going to museums, like a slow lifestyle in the countryside, sort of inspired by my own life, like, and just do a whole series of portraits and like paintings, sort of like a character in a book, but like they're prints that people can buy. And just, I don't know, because I right now I mainly, like 90% of my work, I paint at events and weddings, but I want to create a body of work for people who obviously aren't having a wedding or getting married.
Yeah.
And I want them like to be for history lovers, for art lovers, for, you know, women drawn to intellectual pursuits, and just like paintings that describe this like lifestyle of, I don't know, a woman who's drawn to books and fine art and cafes, cafe culture. And I'm working on finding time to create a series of works that are separate from like what I do for weddings, but still in the same style, still with watercolor. But I do from time to time experiment with like or watercolor pastels, colored pencil.
Mm-hmm.
I still love just regular graphite and red chalk. Like I was telling an artist recently, because I think a lot of artists don't realize like one of the fastest ways to grow as an artist in your career is to just be known for one thing. And I think when in art school here, we learn so many different techniques. We learn how to paint landscapes and figure drawings and stuff like that. And all of that is nice. But when you're trying to create a name for yourself, it's so important to just be known as the go-to person for one thing. Yeah. It's sort of like, would you go to a doctor who is a generalist or a specialist?
If you need, right. Yeah.
And so I do a lot of experiments with like other like mediums and things like that, but I prefer to just like focus on sharing my watercolor paintings and figurative works or fashion type illustrations because that's what I want to be known for. But it's okay to continue experimenting with different mediums. Like it doesn't hurt.
No, absolutely. No, and it's fun,
Yeah.
I just have to say I'm a very visual person. And although I have no like artistic skills whatsoever, but having said that, while you were talking about your idea, I completely saw the whole thing.
Oh my gosh.
You have to do this.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like you have to do it. I had this vision. We'll talk about it after because I don't want anyone to steal your ideas. But I just like completely saw a whole like narrative play out in my mind.
And that's so exciting that, okay, you're my target audience
I know,
for that. So
I know.
happy that it resonates with you.
No, let's talk about it. No, we'll talk about it we'll talk about it on the way back into town. So I want to talk a little bit more about the creative process, which is something I'm pretty obsessed with because although I have no visual like arts skills, I am a writer. And so I'm always curious about other people's creative rituals. So I'm just curious about how you sort of get into, if there are any rituals you have or any habits you have to get into the creative space, into that zone.
Yes, I do have a sort of ritual that until you mentioned it, I didn't even think of it as a ritual, but I realize I do this every time before I draw. But I usually warm up with gesture drawings and like I have like a sketchbook, a leather sketchbook that I got from one of the many leather shops here in Florence. And I love it because with this sketchbook, you can take the paper out, the pad of paper that comes in, and you can always like change it. And so I don't feel afraid of ruining the sketchbook. And I use it sort of like how a musician warms up, does like warms. Oh my gosh, I can't talk.
It's fine.
I warm up. I use it to warm up. I do like these just sketches just to get my hand moving. And I'll do like a 5-minute burn where I just draw what I see in front of me, like just really quickly without even lifting my hand off the page. Or I'll just try to draw what is called drawing blind, where you just keep looking at the subject. And the goal is just to force myself to draw on the right side of the brain and think in the language of shapes and line and color and not things, because it is a switch that you make when you're creating art. And also just to make sure I'm making really expressive long strokes. So I always like to begin like just with some warm-ups that I just throw away. No one has to see, so there's no pressure. And then I like to do some color studies of just different colors I observe when I'm going around Florence. Like I think there's so many beautiful like color palettes just in the city. Like even, for example, the facade of Santa Maria Novella, I love the cream with that shade of green and the dusty pink. And I'll like, sketch those in my notebook to refer to like if I'm ever painting something and I wanted to have like a Renaissance feel, because color really influences your mood, or it really helps you to convey an emotion or an idea in a painting. And another thing I do is I always like have a cup of tea ready, like a nice vanilla or frutti di bosco tea. And then I typically play an audiobook while I work. It helps me to concentrate. Like
interesting.
Yeah, like I've gone through, I can go through like 10 audiobooks in a week because I listen to them constantly while I work.
Fascinating. See, that's fascinating to me because I listen to music, but I listen to podcasts too.
Yes,
I always have to have some kind of background noise too when I'm writing. It depends. Sometimes I can't, but most times I need to have something. I don't know why. It kind of grounds me.
Yeah, you would think it would distract you, but no, it helps you to focus somehow.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It helps me focus a little more. Yeah. I just don't know. I could fall. I'm a little resistant to audiobooks.
Really?
Yeah, I've never tried.
Okay, you have to try it. I would begin with a mystery. Like I've gone through all the Agatha Christie, something that keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, because I don't know why. Like audio, I listen to so many podcasts, but for some reason with books, I'm just very old school.
I understand. No,
I don't know if I'll ever get there. Is he okay? Yeah. Now maybe I'll get there eventually, though. I want to talk a little. You mentioned Florence. Well, we've been talking about Florence, obviously, but I want to talk a little more about Florence, and more specifically, how living here influences your craft. You just mentioned, for example, the undeniable beauty. But, as a long-term resident, I also see just how much the city has changed, and in wonderful ways, drawing young creatives like you, especially in the post-pandemic period. And it's international, so it often feels very cosmopolitan, very worldly, especially compared to what it used to be like. But at the same time, it's very intimate. And I'm just wondering how the city has affected your work, living in a place like this.
Yeah, I think Florence is almost as if my work would not have even come to fruition if I hadn't lived in Florence, honestly. I am so inspired by the artisans
Yeah.
that live in the city. And I think that seeing their dedication and passion to their craft, and also how much attention they put into detail, even if no one else notices, even if they don't get a lot of sales, how they just have devoted their lives to something that they believe in is really inspiring for me. And so I regularly try to go into their workshops and talk to them. And somehow, like, they've been some of the most inviting people I've met. Like, they always like welcome me in, and we'll end up talking for several hours, or they'll even do a demonstration. So like I've recently visited a father and son who have a stationery shop near the Duomo, and I was talking with him about his process, and he said, like, he's always studying the masters, but he realizes that he's his own person, and he will eventually do something in his own style. Like, and that's the beauty of it. When we try to copy our heroes, we always fall short, and that's how our own style develops. But one thing that stood out to me that he said was, it's all trial and error. And when I heard even someone who's like a master, like he's like, been doing this for dozens and dozens of years, when I saw even someone like him, still fails, and like he doesn't even view it as something to be ashamed of. It's more like it's a part of the process. The creative process is trial and error. You try something, see if it works, and then try again. That really spoke to me. And so now I'm not as precious with one individual drawing. I'm just like, as long as I want to be prolific as an artist versus like trying to do one great piece. Because if you do 100 paintings, then it's bound to be like at least 1 or even 10 good pieces from that. And so
Yeah.
I learned from them to get fulfillment from the process of creating, versus simply just focusing on trying to create a perfect piece. Because when you get caught up in that, like, you don't end up doing anything, and it can stop you from making things. It can just clog you up. Just focus on showing up every day and being consistent. I think that was one of the things I learned from the artisans. And what else? Yeah, and then I have another friend of artisans. Like they have their studio where they make leather journals and marble paper, and just seeing like how focused they are on creating beauty and carrying on the legacy, even when the rewards aren't always high, because artisans sometimes are overlooked by tourists. I'm not really sure why.
I don't know.
But I don't know. Just seeing, I view them as my heroes. And talking to them inspires me, because even though I work quickly at events, I still take the time at home to train my hand so that I can become faster. But I put a lot of care and attention to detail in each piece. And so I think that was something I learned from the artisans here. And then I'm also just really inspired by just the vintage markets. I love seeing the prints of, like, I don't know if you've gone to like the flea market in Mercato delle Pulci in Sant'Ambrogio. Yeah, and like you'll just see these like nice vintage prints, and I just find them so stunning. So I'll always go there, and I'm like, wow, this is something I want to incorporate in my work at some point. And so, yeah, just aside from the museums, just like Florence today is very inspiring.
And are there places that you like find yourself always going back to because you can always find inspiration? What are some of your favorite places in Florence? You've mentioned Santa Maria Novella, you've mentioned artisans shops, you've mentioned just now the Mercato delle Pulci. Are there other spaces where you're just like, okay, I need to go and see something beautiful or find inspiration? Do you find yourself always going back to the same places?
Oh my gosh, yes. I even have a list of places that I call my places for inspiration. Oh my gosh. I love various cafes even because I like to people watch.
Yeah.
So I love the historic cafes in the center, like Rivoire, and imagining like what it would have been like when artists and intellectuals and writers would gather there like in the 1920s and things like that, and viewing myself as a character in that
No, I
period.
love that. I love that.
I also like going to Giardino Boboli. I like going to some of the lesser known churches and museums. Bargello,
Yeah.
the Museo dell'Opera del Duomo, and then any exhibition usually at Museo degli Innocenti because they have pretty good exhibitions.
They do great exhibitions. It's a great space.
Yeah.
It's a great space.
And then also I still, because my studio is technically wherever I paint, like a villa or a castle or palace, like for a wedding, I usually do a lot of my work in cafes around the center, and I love that. So I'll just take my art supplies are very portable. That's another reason why I love watercolor. I'll just go to like Cinema Odeon. I love that space so much.
I do too.
Isn't it so inspiring?
I love it. I love it. I've always loved it.
Last time I was there, I actually met they do these writers talks, and I saw that there was a talk with a writer who had published a series of books, and he had written all of them there in Odeon.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Isn't that cool?
I love that. That's a great space. They've done a good. I was a little sad at the beginning because I had like a very strong emotional attachment to it as a cinema.
Oh, I understand.
It was like one of my happy places, and so I thought like, I don't know how I feel about this, but I still feel the magic when I go in.
That's good.
And I like the vibe in there, and I like that you smell books and that they, play movies and clips and all this stuff, and it feels if you can get a place to sit, because the only problem with it is that it's so crowded, right?
Yeah.
So you have
but
to
they
be
still
strategic.
do movies at night.
They do.
So
I know.
That's cool.
I know. It's
right?
a little more limited than it used to be.
Yeah.
But it's okay because they've done a really good job. Like they had to reinvent, and they did like a good job. So I can't. I never criticize them because I love them.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little more about the events that you do because you mentioned weddings, but I know you also do other stuff. So give our listeners an idea of what else Sheean is up to these days.
Oh my gosh, I hope I can talk about it.
Oh no, you're always doing these top secret things because you also I think we were texting in the spring and you told me that you were at like some super VIP event with all these like super VIPs and you were like, I don't know if I can talk about it.
Yeah, okay, so oh my gosh, okay, I'm trying to think of what I can say. So, yeah, I do a lot of events for high profile people, like sometimes like dinner parties or like a company event, and it'll be like really, really elevated, and I still don't even know how I got there, but I'm very grateful. But like, I'm not able to post about them on social media, but no, they're really amazing. So like, I think that also helped me to realize, this is something I could do like full time. When someone who's like the CEO of like one of the most important social media companies like tells you that they have your work of art in their living room, and then they come back and then you see them again next year and they're like asking for a portrait again, or when you painted like politicians and I don't know, like talk show hosts and people who are like top 5 singers in Apple Music and Grammy Award winners, like you realize like, okay, this is something that is working. And the imposter syndrome, I think, never goes away. But I think you just learn to like manage it, and you just remind yourself, oh, well, this person loved my work, so I must be good.
No, you are. Don't. No need for imposter syndrome. What's been like the most interesting reaction somebody's had to your work on the spot? Like, I'm sure people say things to you like, what's been the greatest compliment to you, or just something that surprised you or really made you happy?
Several times I've been like overwhelmed by the people I meet at these weddings and events. One recently was at a wedding I did at Palazzo Tivoli Gadi. It's a hotel in the center of Florence. And I met this couple, this gay couple, and they were so fun. if you're listening, hi. They were so much fun. They would basically come to my table where I was working every 10 minutes and just give me like all the gossip and scoop about what was going on in the actual wedding, and like
I
also
love that.
come to check on my paintings and see if they recognize anyone. It was a wedding of about like 70 people, and this was really interesting because the grooms had dressed all of their guests. So everyone was in these like stunning ball gowns and like all this, like I don't think any of the men were wearing black suits. They were all wearing these like really ornate suits like with red and like prints and gold, and it was incredible. So for me, like, as
to
a
paint
fashion
that,
illustrator,
how wonderful.
it was so much fun to paint.
So exciting.
So on one of their trips back, I wanted to make sure I did their painting like while they were still there, because I do finish like some of the paintings after the wedding, like depending on how many, like how big of a audience or how big of a wedding guest count it is. I do finish them after the wedding in studio, but I was like, I want to really make sure I get these two because I know they'll appreciate it. Well, when they did see the painting, they ended up crying. He was like, "What? Like this is so beautiful. Like I can literally have this memory of me and my husband here in Florence celebrating our best friends, and I'm gonna frame this." Like they were there for like 10 minutes just like crying, and he was just talking about how he works in events back in Boston and like he sees these all the time and how like my work like really spoke to him, and they were just saying how like it goes beyond just like copying the person but capturing their essence. And he said like I don't even know a lot of these people, but I feel like I know and I've met them through your paintings. And I was like, I was tearing up because that's what I'm trying to do. Like, I really try to capture the essence of people in my style. Like, I want them to see themselves as I see them as the artists and not just like a copy of reality. Like, I try to go beyond that and show some of their character, but also my interpretation of them. Because what I learned in art school from my teacher is that the model is there to be interpreted by the artist. So it's like we have to impress our feeling onto it. That's what makes it a work of art. And so when I see that people get it, it really means a lot.
I love that. I love that. So we've come to the last question, which is what's next for you, Sheean? If you can talk about it, of course. You don't need to name names or anything. But what's coming up for you?
What's coming up is another season of events around weddings and events around Italy. I've already booked a number of events around Venice and Abruzzo even.
Oh, wonderful.
Probably going to go back, Lake Como again, Amalfi, like all over. And also want to keep doing workshops. So I do
that's something I wanted you to talk about because we didn't get to it, but talk about the workshops you do as well, because I've seen them and I want you to talk about them.
Okay, so basically I do watercolor workshops, but I kind of view it as like an elevated paint and sip, because instead of just like copying a photo, you're actually learning watercolor techniques, and each person leaves with their own original painting. So and then it's also not paint and sip because it's like actual like restaurant quality aperitivo with like wines and Venetian style cicchetti. So it's like really, really elevated, and I feel like that's the best way to experience art, like with good food, good wine, and like real technique. And so it's just something that I would have wanted like for my first art course, especially like as a beginner when you're dabbling and you want to learn, but you also want to have fun. So that's sort of what I try to do in these workshops. And I'm really lucky that I get to work with an amazing restaurant in the center called Il Baccaro Fiorentino. And they have this beautiful space. And so I usually go there with like groups of like 5 to 10 people. And yeah, we do a lot of like paintings inspired by the cuisine or the flora and fauna of the gardens in Florence. So first I show them like the techniques of watercolor and just get them familiar with the medium. And then we just each do their own, they do each person does their own individual piece, and I go around and just like guide them step by step. And so usually everyone ends up leaving with something that they're pretty proud of. And I also work with various universities. I've done several workshops with CET programs with Syracuse. with different university programs around the city. But I want to expand my workshop experiences and maybe even teach like Tuscan landscapes, and like try to do like monthly watercolor workshops.
Wow, I love that. I cannot wait to see what you do next. We'll include all your information in the show notes so people know how to find you, where to find you, and what you're doing. Because I think your workshops sound wonderful. I actually want to. As I mentioned, I have no skills whatsoever, but I'm not. Like, I feel like it's something I really want to try.
You can learn.
Yeah, I know.
Everyone can learn.
I know.
That's the whole point.
I know.
Everyone can learn the techniques of painting and drawing.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it.
With the right teacher and the right guidance, you can learn, and it's going to be fun.
All right, let's do it, Sheean. Let's do it. We'll go to the Toulouse-Lautrec exhibit.
Yes.
And then, of course, I'm going to do one of your workshops. Thank you so much I love your story. No, can I just say, like, I am so proud of what you've done, just as somebody who knows how difficult it is to have success here. And I'm just so proud of what you're doing, what you're accomplishing, and the way you're like really impacting people's lives and their experiences here in Italy, and just having their, I don't know, just capturing their spirits, which I think is a very rare gift. And I wish you the best of luck. And I can't wait to see all of the beautiful things you're going to be creating in the coming year.
Thank you so much, Fosca.
I love this. I hope you'll come back.
I definitely will.
Okay. Grazie.